Heading to my son's divorce hearing, I was already dreading seeing my daughter-in-law. Then a child warned me she'd tampered with my car, an attempt on my life just because I was there for my son. I kept my composure, but my silence held a promise. You won't believe how this story unfolds. Like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. A knot of familiar nervousness tightened in Eleanor's stomach as she steered her sensible sedan towards the courthouse. At 65, she'd hoped her days of high drama were behind her. Yet here she was, heading into the final act of her son Owen's bitter divorce from Serafina. The morning air was crisp, a sharp contrast to the swirling mess of emotions she'd been living with for the past 3 years. Part of her felt a profound relief that the ordeal was finally drawing to a close, but it was heavily tinged with a weariness that went bone deep. She knew Owen would be better off, truly, but the emotional toll on everyone had been immense. Serafina. The name alone conjured a kaleidoscope of unpleasant memories. For 3 long years, Eleanor had endured her daughter-in-law's relentless snide comments, the thinly veiled insults delivered with a saccharine smile, and a manipulative streak as sharp as a newly honed blade. Owen, bless his heart, had been utterly blindsided by Serafina's true nature, mistaking her theatrical charm for genuine affection. Eleanor, however, had seen through the facade almost immediately. There was always something cold and calculating behind those perfectly applied false eyelashes, a predatory glint in eyes that otherwise seemed so innocent. She remembered the little jabs at Eleanor's homemaking, her parenting, even her choice of clothes, each one designed to undermine and belittle, always just subtle enough to make Eleanor question if she was overreacting. But she wasn't. Serafina was a master of psychological warfare. She pulled into the nearly empty courthouse parking lot, arriving earlier than necessary. A quiet moment before the storm, she thought, turning off the ignition. As she reached for her purse, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A small, disheveled girl, perhaps no older than 7 or 8, was running towards her car, her tiny legs churning with desperate urgency. Eleanor frowned, wondering if the child was lost. The girl skidded to a halt beside Eleanor's driver's side window, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her clothes were rumpled, her hair a tangle, and she clutched a worn plush rabbit to her chest. Her eyes, wide and terrified, locked onto Eleanor's. "Ma'am, don't start the engine," Lily, as Eleanor would later learn, yelled, her voice thin but piercing with fear. "Your daughter-in-law, Serafina, she did something to your car. Please, please don't start it." Eleanor froze, her hand hovering over the door handle. Serafina? Her car? A cold dread seeped into her bones, replacing the mundane nervousness of a moment ago. "What are you talking about, dear?" she managed, trying to keep her voice calm despite the sudden panic that flared in her chest. "How do you know Serafina?" Lily wrung her hands, her gaze darting nervously around the parking lot. "My daddy works for a man who knows her," she whispered, leaning closer as if sharing a grave secret. "She came to my daddy first, tried to pay him a lot of money to mess with your car. But Daddy said no. He told her it was wrong, real wrong. But then she said she'd find someone else. She was real angry when Daddy said no, ma'am. Please don't start your car." Eleanor felt as though the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Serafina, trying to mess with her car? The implication was horrifying. This wasn't just a snide comment or a manipulation. This was something far more sinister. How could a child know such a thing? And why was she telling her? "I got to go," Lily suddenly blurted out, her eyes widening with a renewed sense of urgency. She took a step back, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter, as if it were a shield against the world. "My daddy don't know I came here. He'd be real mad." With that, she turned and darted away, disappearing quickly between 2 parked SUVs. Eleanor sat there stunned. The parking lot seemed to hum with an unnerving silence. Had that really just happened? She shook herself, her hands trembling, as she opened her door and stepped out. Cautiously, she walked around her car, her eyes scanning every inch of it. She checked the tires, peered under the chassis as best she could, even gave a tentative tug on the hood release. Nothing. Everything looked perfectly normal. No wires dangling, no strange puddles, no visible signs of tampering. A security guard, a burly man with a kind face, walked past, nodding a polite good morning. "Excuse me," Eleanor called out, her voice a little shaky. Did you see a little girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with a stuffed rabbit, running through the parking lot just now?" The guard paused, sweeping his gaze across the lot. "No, ma'am," he replied, shaking his head. "Haven't seen any children this morning. It's usually pretty quiet out here until court starts." Eleanor's heart sank, a wave of self-doubt washing over her. Had she imagined it? Had the stress of the divorce finally gotten to her, conjuring up phantom children and bizarre warnings? The guard offered a reassuring smile and continued on his patrol. Despite the lack of visible evidence in the guard's confirmation, Lily's terrified plea echoed in Eleanor's ears. The child's sincerity, her desperate urgency, felt too real to dismiss entirely. Better to feel foolish than end up dead, she thought, a grim resolve settling over her. She would take an Uber home after court and have her mechanic give the car a thorough inspection. A chilling thought, one she usually dismissed as paranoia, now felt strangely prudent. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor locked her car and headed toward the courthouse entrance. The familiar marble halls greeted her, bustling with the low hum of voices and footsteps. As she entered the main lobby, her eyes automatically scanned for Owen, but instead, they landed on Serafina. Serafina stood near a pillar, her phone pressed to her ear, her designer suit impeccable, her hair perfectly coiffed. She hadn't seen Eleanor yet. Eleanor watched her for a moment, the usual mix of distaste and weary acceptance brewing within her. Then Serafina's gaze flickered up, catching Eleanor's across the crowded room. The transformation was instantaneous and stark. Serafina's face went completely white, as if all the blood had drained from it in a single terrifying rush. Her perfectly composed features contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The phone slipped from her ear, still clutched in her hand. For a split second, her eyes widened, revealing a raw, naked fear that Eleanor had never seen on her face before. Then, just as quickly, Serafina's practiced composure snapped back into place. Her chin lifted, a forced smile touched her lips, and she brought the phone back to her ear, turning slightly away as she began to type something furiously with her free thumb, her gaze darting toward Eleanor one last time before she pretended to be engrossed in her conversation. But Eleanor had seen it. Disappointment, shock, fear. They had flickered across Serafina's face like a strobe light, clear as day. And in that moment, a chilling, undeniable thought solidified in Eleanor's mind, making her stomach clench with a fresh wave of terror. Could that little girl have actually saved my life? The elevator doors hissed shut, encapsulating Eleanor and Serafina in a small, uncomfortable box of silence. Serafina, who had been chatting animatedly on her phone moments before, now held it clutched in her hand, her thumb racing across the screen with frantic energy. She didn't look at Eleanor directly, but Eleanor could feel her gaze, darting uneasy glances in the reflective surface of the stainless steel doors, confirming Eleanor's presence. Every few seconds, Serafina would check her phone, as if expecting a critical message, her perfectly made-up face etched with a palpable agitation that vibrated through the confined space. Eleanor, by contrast, remained outwardly calm, though her stomach churned with a mixture of apprehension and a strange, cold certainty. The little girl's warning, combined with Serafina's shocked reaction in the lobby, had transformed her usual pre-court jitters into something far more primal. When the elevator finally dinged and opened on the appropriate floor, Eleanor was grateful for the escape. She quickly spotted Owen, looking utterly drained, slumped in a chair next to his lawyer. He looked older, more worn than his 38 years should allow, his usually bright eyes dulled by stress and sleepless nights. Her heart ached for him. Eleanor made her way over, offering a small, comforting squeeze to his shoulder. "Mom," Owen mumbled, a weak smile touching his lips. "You made it." Beside him, Miss Ava Sharma, Owen's lawyer, a sharp woman with an unwavering gaze and an air of quiet competence, rose to greet Eleanor. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance. Glad you could be here." Her voice was low, professional, but held a hint of steel. Eleanor had grown to respect Miss Sharma greatly over the past few months. "Morning, Ava," Eleanor replied, her gaze lingering on Owen. "He looks exhausted." Miss Sharma sighed, glancing at Owen with genuine concern. "He's been through a lot. Serafina's demands are, to put it mildly, unreasonable. She's asking for a significant portion of assets Owen accumulated long before they even met, not to mention an exorbitant amount of alimony. It's clear she's trying to bleed him dry." Eleanor nodded, her jaw tight. This was typical Serafina. She had always been opportunistic, but the sheer audacity of her greed now was breathtaking. Owen had built his business from the ground up, years before he met Serafina at a charity gala. To demand half of his premarital assets was beyond unfair. It was a brazen attempt at theft. As they waited for the proceedings to begin, Eleanor couldn't help but observe Serafina across the room. She was still engaged in a flurry of activity with her phone, her fingers flying over the keypad, her brow furrowed in a perpetual frown. Occasionally, she would raise the phone to her ear for a brief, hushed conversation, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes darting around as if afraid of being overheard. Eleanor's earlier conversation with Lily had imprinted itself on her mind, making every one of Serafina's furtive gestures scream guilt. The court session began, and the sterile hum of legal jargon filled the room. Eleanor tried to focus, to understand the complex arguments being laid out, but her attention kept drifting back to Serafina. Serafina wasn't paying attention either, her focus entirely consumed by her phone. The constant texting, the brief, intense phone calls, it was all too much. It was as if she was orchestrating something, a parallel drama playing out alongside the official one. After an hour, the judge called for a brief recess. Eleanor, feeling the need to collect herself, headed for the ladies' restroom. She hoped for a moment of peace, a chance to process the unsettling events of the morning. But as she splashed cold water on her face, she saw Serafina's reflection in the mirror behind her. "Eleanor, darling," Serafina purred, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that set Eleanor's teeth on edge. "Everything all right? You look a bit pale." She leaned against the door frame, a perfectly manicured hand resting casually on her hip. Eleanor slowly turned, meeting Serafina's gaze. "I'm fine, Serafina. Just a long morning." "Oh, I know," Serafina replied, pushing off the door frame and walking closer, her eyes glittering with an unsettling curiosity. "These court things are such a bore. No problems with your car on the way here, I hope? You know, cars can be so unreliable, especially older ones. You never know when they might just decide to give up." The last words were spoken with a peculiar emphasis, a subtle shift in tone that sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. It wasn't a question, it was a veiled statement, a thinly disguised threat. Eleanor felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't concern. This was a fishing expedition, a confirmation-seeking mission. Serafina was probing, trying to see if her plan had worked. "My car runs fine, Serafina," Eleanor stated, her voice firm, deliberately devoid of any tremor. "George taught me to take good care of it. Regular maintenance keeps it reliable." Mentioning her late husband's name was a subtle act of defiance, a reminder of the stability and love Serafina would never understand. "Accidents happen all the time," Serafina continued, her voice low, almost a whisper, "especially to people who don't see them coming." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. Eleanor met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "I always see things coming, Serafina. Always." She held the stare, conveying a strength she didn't entirely feel. Serafina's smile faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of something unreadable. Annoyance, perhaps, or a hint of surprise. She gave a small, dismissive shrug. "Well, that's good then. Wouldn't want anything unexpected to happen." She turned and left, her heels clicking briskly on the tiled floor. Back in the courtroom, Serafina was once again immersed in her phone, but now her frustration was openly visible. Her perfect composure was cracking. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her brows were drawn together, and she occasionally let out a soft, exasperated huff. She typed with furious intensity, then paused, staring at the screen as if willing a response, her foot tapping impatiently against the marble floor. It was clear she wasn't getting the answers or the results she wanted. Eleanor watched her, a dreadful hypothesis forming in her mind. Serafina's repeated glances at the courtroom clock, then at her phone, then at Eleanor herself, created a pattern. It was as if she was waiting for something to happen, something that should have already occurred. The tension in the air for Eleanor was almost unbearable. Then, around 11:30 a.m., just as the judge was beginning to summarize a particularly intricate financial argument, the courtroom doors swung open quietly. A man entered, looking strikingly out of place amidst the crisp suits and hushed tones. He was rough-looking, perhaps in his late 30s, with a day's growth of stubble, a worn leather jacket, and telltale grease stains on his hands and under his fingernails. A mechanic, Eleanor instinctively thought. He scanned the room, his eyes settling on Serafina. He walked directly to her table, oblivious to the ongoing proceedings. Serafina looked up, her expression a mix of impatience and expectation. The man leaned in, whispering something brief and concise into her ear. Eleanor watched, transfixed, as Serafina's face went completely white for the second time that morning. Her eyes widened, not with fear this time, but with an explosive fury that contorted her features into an ugly snarl. Her body language became stiff, rigid with rage, her hands clenching into tight fists under the table. She whispered something back, sharp and venomous, but the man merely shrugged, a careless, almost insolent gesture. He then turned and walked out of the courtroom as abruptly as he had entered. Serafina remained frozen, her face still pale, looking as though she'd just been slapped. Her entire body seemed to deflate, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in an instant. It was all Eleanor needed. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This must be the mechanic she had found, after Lily's daddy had refused. The one Serafina had hired to tamper with her car. And his message, judging by Serafina's raw fury, was that he had failed. He had not sabotaged Eleanor's car. Eleanor felt a cold dread, quickly followed by a surge of adrenaline. Serafina had expected her not to arrive. She had expected to be sitting there in court, free from Eleanor's watchful eyes, free from her support for Owen, perhaps even celebrating Eleanor's absence. Or worse, the chilling reality hit Eleanor then. The little girl, Lily, had indeed saved her life. The clock struck 12, signaling the lunch break, but Eleanor felt no appetite. The earlier courtroom drama, Serafina's thinly veiled threats, and the mechanic's ominous visit had tied her stomach in knots. Owen, bless his heart, tried to coax her into grabbing a sandwich, but she simply shook her head, offering a weak smile. "I just need some air, dear. I'll be fine." She promised Miss Sharma she'd be back in plenty of time, then excused herself, her steps purposeful as she headed back to the deserted courthouse parking lot. The moment she reached her car, the cold certainty settled over her again. That little girl hadn't been a figment of her imagination, nor had Serafina's shock and fury been coincidental. Eleanor pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through her contacts. She needed professional confirmation, and there was only one person she truly trusted with her car, someone who had known her and her late husband George for decades. Arthur's Auto Repair was a small, unassuming shop on the outskirts of town, run by a man whose gruff exterior hid a heart of gold and an unparalleled mechanical aptitude. George had sworn by Arthur's honesty and skill, and Eleanor had continued the tradition after his passing. When Arthur answered, his voice crackling slightly through the phone, Eleanor felt a wave of relief. "Arthur, it's Eleanor Vance," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Eleanor, to what do I owe the pleasure? Everything all right with the old sedan?" Arthur's tone was cheerful, unaware of the grim implications behind her call. Eleanor hesitated, feeling a blush creep up her neck. Explaining this would sound utterly ridiculous. "Arthur, I need you to do me a huge favor. I know this sounds strange, but I have a very strong suspicion someone has tampered with my car, specifically the brakes." She recounted Lily's warning, the girl's desperate plea, and Serafina's odd behavior, leaving out no detail. As she spoke, she could hear the slight pause on Arthur's end, indicating he was listening intently, processing the bizarre tale. To her immense relief, Arthur didn't laugh or dismiss her. "Eleanor, if you're worried, you're worried. Don't feel foolish. You know me, I've seen stranger things. If you think someone's messed with your brakes, you don't drive that car another inch. I'll send my flatbed over right now. You just stay put, all right?" "No, Arthur, it's fine. I just need to get back to court. I can drive it over to you after the hearing. It's only a few miles, mostly back roads," Eleanor insisted, wanting to avoid a scene at the courthouse. Besides, the security guard hadn't seen Lily, so it wasn't impossible she was mistaken. Arthur's voice was firm, Eleanor, if it's the brakes, even a few miles could be fatal. You stay right where you are. My son, Mark, is just finishing up a job close by. He can pick you up. Eleanor knew better than to argue with Arthur when he was in his protective mode. All right, Arthur, thank you. I'll text you the address. Within 20 minutes, a familiar flatbed truck driven by Arthur's equally kind son, Mark, pulled into the parking lot. Mark greeted her with a warm smile, no questions asked, and efficiently loaded her sedan onto the bed. He dropped her off at the shop and promised to call her once Arthur had a look. The next half hour was agonizing. Eleanor sat in the small, greasy waiting room, the smell of oil and old tires doing nothing to calm her frayed nerves. Every creak and clatter from the garage made her jump. What if it was nothing? What if she was just being paranoid, fueling a dramatic narrative that wasn't real? The self-doubt, a constant companion in these past few years with Serafina, started to creep back in. Finally, Arthur emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. His usual friendly demeanor was gone, replaced by a grim, serious expression that sent a fresh wave of fear through Eleanor. Eleanor, he began, his voice low and heavy, someone definitely messed with your car, and they knew exactly what they were doing. He led her to a small, cluttered office, urging her to sit down. It's the brake lines. They weren't cut, but they were loosened just enough that they would have given out completely within the first few miles of driving. You would have had little to no warning. It would have looked like brake failure, a terrible accident. Eleanor's hands began to shake uncontrollably. Are you saying I could have been killed, Arthur? The words felt hollow, unbelievable, yet chillingly real. Arthur nodded slowly, his gaze steady and unwavering. Eleanor, this wasn't an accident waiting to happen. This was an attempt. Someone tried to murder you. The room spun for a moment. Murder. The word hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Serafina. It had to be Serafina. The child's warning, Serafina's reaction, the mechanic in the courtroom. It all made sense in the most horrifying way. Arthur Blount, Eleanor said, her voice barely a whisper. You remember what I told you about a woman trying to hire someone to mess with my car? Did anyone like that approach you? Arthur leaned back in his creaky chair, a thoughtful frown on his face. Funny you should ask, Eleanor. About 3 days ago, a woman came in. Blonde, pretty, dressed real fancy, the kind who wouldn't usually set foot in a place like this. She said her name was Mary, but everything about her felt fake, from her overly sweet smile to the way she kept glancing around. She showed me some pictures on her phone. Pictures of your car, Eleanor, and pictures of you. Eleanor gasped, her blood running cold. She wanted some off-the-books work done, Arthur continued, his voice hardening. Wanted me to make it look like a faulty repair, something that would cause a problem on the road. Started low, then kept upping the cash. Went all the way up to $2,000. He shook his head in disgust. I told her to get out. My shop doesn't do that kind of business. And when you refused? Eleanor prompted, her mind racing. Oh, she got nasty real quick, Arthur scoffed. Dropped the sweet act faster than you could blink. Started threatening me, saying she'd find someone else who wasn't so morally burdened. Then she demanded I give her names. Asked if I knew any mechanics who weren't so particular. Said she was on a tight deadline. A cold dread settled over Eleanor. And did you? Arthur sighed, a look of regret clouding his features. I might have mentioned a name, a shady character, Ben Carter, runs a chop shop a few towns over. A real piece of work, but I figured she wouldn't actually go through with it. He's known for doing dirty work, no questions asked. Eleanor felt a sudden, sharp jolt of realization. The little girl who warned her. Lily. She said her daddy told Serafina no. Could Ben Carter have a daughter? A daughter named Lily? Arthur, Eleanor said, leaning forward, her voice urgent. Does Ben Carter have a daughter? A small girl, maybe 8 or 9, with a stuffed rabbit? Arthur's eyes widened slightly. He does, actually. Sweet little thing, always tagging along with him, even though he tries to keep her away from the shop. Lily, her name is. Poor kid, growing up in that environment. But for all his faults, Ben loves that girl more than life itself. She's the only good thing about him. Eleanor closed her eyes, a wave of profound gratitude washing over her, mingled with a fierce determination. Lily, that brave, innocent child, had defied her father, defied Serafina, to save a complete stranger. She had risked everything. Eleanor opened her eyes, meeting Arthur's worried gaze. Arthur, this is attempted murder. I need to go to the police, but I also need to find Lily. She's crucial, and I need to protect her. A child's word alone won't be enough, not against someone like Serafina. We need more. She stood up, a new resolve hardening her expression. The fear was still there, a cold undercurrent, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful surge of purpose. She would not only ensure justice for herself, but also protect the brave little girl who had given her a second chance at life. The Uber ride back to the courthouse felt surreal, the city lights blurring into an indistinguishable smear outside the window. Eleanor's mind reeled with Arthur's words. Attempted murder. The phrase echoed, cold and stark, in the silence of her thoughts. Serafina, her son's wife, the woman who had sworn vows of love and loyalty, she had tried to kill Eleanor. The horrific reality settled in, a suffocating weight that made it hard to breathe. Eleanor clutched her purse, her knuckles white. Her first instinct was to tell Owen, to warn him of the viper he had married. But then she pictured his face, already so worn and fragile. The revelation would utterly devastate him, break him in a way she wasn't sure he could recover from. He was already struggling with the end of his marriage, the betrayal of Serafina's true character. To discover she was also a would-be murderer, targeting his own mother? No, not yet. Eleanor needed more than a child's warning and a mechanic's testimony. She needed concrete proof, undeniable evidence that would leave Serafina no room to deny or twist the narrative. Back in the fluorescent-lit halls of the courthouse, the air felt charged, oppressive. Eleanor walked with a new awareness, every shadow seeming to hold a hidden threat. As she entered the courtroom, her gaze immediately found Serafina, who was already seated, chatting idly with her lawyer. Serafina's eyes, as if drawn by an invisible thread, flickered up and met Eleanor's. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, Eleanor saw it, pure, unadulterated rage. It was a raw, primal emotion, far deeper and more terrifying than the calculated anger Serafina usually displayed. It was the rage of someone whose meticulously planned scheme had been foiled, whose prey had escaped. The mask quickly fell back into place, replaced by a strained smile. But Eleanor had seen enough. Serafina was not just angry, she was furious that Eleanor was still alive. The afternoon session dragged on, a monotonous drone of legal arguments that blurred into a meaningless hum. Eleanor sat, outwardly composed, but her mind was racing, trying to piece together the depth of Serafina's malice. During another brief recess, Serafina, ever the predator, decided to approach her. "Eleanor, darling, there you are," Serafina purred, her voice sweet and syrupy, as if they were discussing recipes at a garden party. She swept gracefully toward Eleanor, her fake smile firmly plastered on her face. "We were just starting to worry about you. You were so late getting back from lunch. Everything all right?" Eleanor met her gaze, her own expression carefully neutral. This was it, the moment she could subtly confront Serafina, to let her know she was on to her, without giving away too much. "Perfectly fine, Serafina," Eleanor replied, her voice calm and even. "Just taking care of some car maintenance. You know how important it is to keep everything in working order." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Especially the brakes. You never know what might happen if someone's been messing with things they shouldn't." The effect was immediate. Serafina's smile vanished, replaced by a swift, involuntary flash of anger in her eyes. It was gone in an instant, but Eleanor saw it clearly. A muscle in Serafina's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She quickly recomposed herself, her smile returning, though it looked brittle now, like thin ice. "Oh, really?" she said, her voice a little too high. "Well, that's good you're so diligent. One can never be too careful, can one?" "Indeed," Eleanor replied, holding Serafina's gaze. This wasn't just a game anymore. The game had changed completely. Serafina knew that Eleanor knew, and that made Eleanor even more of a target. The judge, citing the complexity of the financial arguments and needing more time to review the submitted documents, postponed the final decision until the following week. Eleanor felt a mix of relief and renewed dread. Another week in limbo, another week with Serafina lurking. That evening, after Owen had finally collapsed into bed, exhausted, Eleanor found a quiet corner in her living room. She needed help, real help, beyond what a local mechanic could provide. She pulled out her phone and called her nephew, Daniel. Daniel was a private investigator, a former police officer who had traded the bureaucracy of the force for the gritty, independent pursuit of truth. He was smart, resourceful, and fiercely loyal to his family. Aunt Eleanor, what a surprise. Everything okay? Daniel's voice was warm, tinged with a slight concern, as if he could sense her agitation through the phone lines. No, Daniel, it's not okay. Far from it, Eleanor began, and then, in a rush, she recounted the entire harrowing story. Lily's urgent warning in the parking lot, the initial disbelief, the chilling confirmation from Arthur about the sabotaged brake lines, and Serafina's enraged reaction in the courtroom lobby and her thinly veiled threats in the restroom. She even told him about the mechanic who visited Serafina in court and Arthur's mention of Ben Carter. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Jesus, Aunt Eleanor, Daniel finally exclaimed, his voice laced with horror. You could have been killed. This isn't just a bitter divorce. This is attempted murder. I know, Eleanor said, her voice tight. But Daniel, I think it's more than that. I think Serafina's plan goes beyond just the divorce settlement. I think she wants Owen to be completely vulnerable. Something bigger. Something related to his business, maybe. She wants everything. Daniel was quiet for a moment, processing the enormity of what Eleanor had just told him. You might be right, Auntie. This kind of malice, this level of planning, usually has deeper roots than just alimony. Okay, I'll start digging. First thing, I'll look into Ben Carter. If he's the one who was supposed to do the job, he'll know what Serafina promised him, and possibly why. I can probably find his address, maybe even get a lead on Lily's whereabouts. Be careful, Daniel, Eleanor warned. This woman is dangerous. I will be, he assured her. But Aunt Eleanor, you need to be careful too. This is serious. You should consider getting some protection, or at the very least, call the police. Eleanor sighed. I've thought about it, Danielle. But what do I tell them? A child's word and Arthur's testimony, without direct evidence linking Serafina to Ben or the car, might not be enough. Serafina is a master at playing the victim, at twisting narratives. She'd deny everything, accuse me of harassment, and use it to undermine Owen's case. She'd claim I'm an unstable old woman trying to derail her divorce. We need hard evidence, something irrefutable, to make this stick. And I need to protect Lily. Daniel understood. He knew Serafina's type well from his years on the force. All right, Aunt E, you're right. We need more than circumstantial. I'll get on this first thing. I'll try to gather as much information as I can on both Serafina and Ben Carter and the connections between them. I'll be in touch within 24 hours, if not sooner. Stay safe, please. Eleanor thanked him, the weight on her shoulders easing slightly now that Daniel was on the case. The game had truly changed. It was no longer just about Owen's divorce. It was about survival, justice, and protecting an innocent child. If you're finding this story as gripping as I hope, please remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss a single part of what happens next. You won't believe the depths of depravity we're about to uncover. The next morning, Eleanor awoke with a sense of dread still clinging to her, heavy and oppressive. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the previous day's events. Just as she was brewing her first cup of coffee, her phone rang, its sudden chirp making her jump. It was Daniel. Aunt Eleanor, good morning, and he said, his voice unusually grave. Before I tell you what I've found, I need you to sit down. Eleanor's heart thumped. She sank into a kitchen chair, bracing herself. All right, Daniel, I'm sitting. What is it? First, yes, he confirmed. Ben Carter does have a daughter. Her name is Lily. About 7 or 8, apparently. She's definitely the girl you described. A wave of relief quickly followed on a surge of gratitude and renewed determination washed over Eleanor. Lily was real. She was brave. And second, Daniel continued, his voice hardening, I did some digging into Ben Carter's finances. He usually operates purely in cash, flying under the radar. But 3 days ago, there was a $5,000 cash deposit into a new bank account he opened, And then yesterday, another 15,000, all cash. Total of 20,000 in two deposits, Aunt E. That's a lot of money for car sabotage, even the kind Serafina was asking for. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. $20,000. The sheer audacity of Serafina's greed, her willingness to pay such a sum for something so sinister, was staggering. $20,000, Eleanor whispered, the number feeling obscene. What could she possibly want that would cost $20,000, Daniel? What could be worth that much to her? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Daniel admitted. Ben went to work as if nothing were amiss this morning. No sudden trips, no sign of him disappearing. If he had botched a murder attempt, or if he'd simply taken the money and run after the car sabotage failed, I'd expect him to be laying low, maybe getting out of town. The fact that he's still here and still got a second, much larger payment tells me one thing: the second payment was for something else. Something he agreed to do after the car incident failed. Something far more significant than just messing with your brakes. My gut tells me Lily holds the key to this. A cold dread seeped into Eleanor's bones. This was worse than she thought. Much, much worse. We need to talk to Lily, Daniel. And we need to do it without involving Ben or putting her in any more danger. Daniel agreed, and boy, I've located Ben Carter's apartment complex on the east side of town. It's a pretty rundown area. He doesn't usually get home until later in the evening, but Lily would be getting out of school around 3:30 or 3:45. That might be our best window. That afternoon, a little after 3 o'clock, Eleanor found herself sitting nervously in Daniel's nondescript sedan parked a block away from Ben Carter's apartment building. The neighborhood was indeed dilapidated, with peeling paint on the buildings and overflowing dumpsters. It was a world away from the manicured lawns and genteel quiet of her own suburban street. Daniel had done his research, even down to Lily's school schedule. He sat patiently beside her, his gaze steady and watchful. The wait felt interminable. Eleanor's heart pounded with a mixture of apprehension and hope. What if Lily didn't come? What if she refused to talk? What if they scared her? At precisely 3:45, a small figure emerged from around the corner, walking slowly, her head bowed. It was Lily. She was carrying an oversized backpack that seemed to swallow her small frame, and her ever-present stuffed rabbit was tucked securely under one arm. Eleanor's breath hitched. "Lily," Eleanor called softly, rolling down her window just a crack. "Lily, wait." The child looked up, startled, her eyes wide. She recognized Eleanor instantly. A flicker of fear, then relief, crossed her face. "You didn't start the car," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Eleanor nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "No, sweetie, I didn't. Because you warned me. You saved my life, Lily." "Thank you." Lily's eyes welled up, and she took a tentative step closer. "My daddy, he was real mad at me for telling." "I know," Eleanor said gently, her voice full of compassion. "But you did the right thing, Lily. The very brave thing. Can we talk for a minute? I promise I'm not here to get your daddy in trouble. Or you. I just want to stop Serafina from hurting more people." Lily hesitated, glancing nervously around. Then, as if making a momentous decision, she nodded. Daniel, sensing her unease, got out of the car, offering Lily a reassuring smile. He retrieved a small blanket from the back seat and spread it on the grassy patch next to the car, inviting Lily to sit. Once she was settled, clutching her rabbit, Lily began to speak, her voice trembling at first, then gaining a quiet strength. "Serafina, she was real mean when Daddy said no to doing the car thing. She said she knew Daddy steals cars sometimes, and she'd tell the police if he didn't do the other thing." Eleanor and Daniel exchanged a grim look. Steals cars was likely code for chop shop operations, dealing in stolen parts or revinning vehicles. Serafina had found Ben Carter's weak spot, his fear of losing Lily. "What other thing, Lily?" Eleanor asked, her voice as gentle as she could make it. "What did Serafina want your daddy to do?" Lily's eyes filled with tears again, and her lower lip trembled. She leaned in close, whispering the horrifying truth, her small voice almost lost in the urban din. "She wants Daddy to take your son somewhere. Tonight. Make it look like an accident, but not kill him. Just hurt him real bad so he can't think good anymore. Eleanor's world tilted. The air left her lungs in a whoosh. Incapacitate Owen? Not kill him, but permanently disable him? The sheer depravity of it was breathtaking. Her mind instantly flashed to Owen's Thursday night poker game, a weekly ritual. It was Thursday. Lily, seeing Eleanor's shock, started to cry softly. Daddy didn't want to. He said it was wrong, but he was scared. Scared the police would take him, and then I'd have to go to foster care. He said he had no choice. Eleanor's heart ached for the child, for Ben trapped in Serafina's cruel web. But the rage, a cold, burning fire, simmered just beneath the surface. Serafina wasn't just greedy, she was monstrous. She wanted Owen permanently out of the picture, not dead, which would trigger a lengthy investigation and potentially delay her access to his assets, but incapacitated. Unable to manage his business, unable to fight her in court, leaving her free to seize everything. The thought made Eleanor sick to her stomach. Eleanor reached out, gently taking Lily's small, trembling hand. Lily, listen to me, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor of fury within her. There is a way to protect your daddy and to stop Serafina. We can keep you safe, and we can make sure Serafina never hurts anyone else again. But we need your help. As Eleanor outlined her daring plan to Lily, the chill of fear that had plagued her for days began to recede, replaced by a cold, unshakable determination. Serafina had gravely underestimated the power of a mother's love, not just for her son, but for the innocent child caught in her wicked web. Lily, initially hesitant, watched Eleanor intently, her small face mirroring a growing hope. Daniel, ever the pragmatist, listened to Eleanor's detailed strategy, interjecting with practical advice and ensuring every contingency was covered. They spent the entire afternoon, after ensuring Lily was safely settled with a trusted neighbor, meticulously planning every single detail. The first crucial step was gaining Ben Carter's cooperation. Eleanor understood that Ben, despite his shadowy dealings, was not a malicious man at heart. He was a father, desperate to protect his child. With Lily's tearful plea and explanation, combined with Daniel's firm but understanding approach, Ben finally agreed. He was trapped, and Eleanor's plan offered a way out that protected Lily. That evening, Eleanor spent an hour steeling herself before making a series of crucial calls. She watched the clock, the seconds ticking by with agonizing slowness. She thought of Owen, blissfully unaware of the dark machinations swirling around him, preparing for his weekly poker game. A fresh wave of fury at Serafina's depravity washed over her. Finally, she called Ben. His voice was rough, weary, but resolute. I never wanted to get mixed up in something like this, he confessed, the words heavy with regret. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, Eleanor. Made a lot of bad choices to make ends meet for Lily, but I've never hurt an innocent person. And the thought of hurting your son or losing Lily, it just tore me apart. His voice cracked, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath his hardened exterior. He'd felt utterly trapped by Serafina's threats to expose his chop shop activities, knowing it would send him to jail and Lily into the foster care system. You won't hurt anyone, Ben, Eleanor assured him, her voice firm. You're going to help us stop Serafina, but for this to work, you have to call her. You have to tell her you're going through with her plan tonight. You have to convince her you're doing exactly what she wants. Ben let out a shaky breath. Okay, Eleanor, for Lily, I'll do it. With that critical piece in place, Eleanor moved to the next step. At precisely 8:00 p.m., she picked up her phone again, her thumb hovering over Serafina's contact. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her resolve was unyielding. This call was pure theater. She waited for the third ring before Serafina's familiar, perfectly modulated voice answered. Eleanor, to what do I owe the unexpected pleasure? There was a hint of veiled suspicion, a note of triumph she couldn't quite hide, lingering beneath the polite facade. Eleanor forced a lightness into her voice she didn't feel. Serafina, darling, look, yesterday was a bit tense, wasn't it? And with the judge postponing the decision, I thought it might be good if we just cleared the air. Maybe over coffee tomorrow morning? Before court? No lawyers, just us. A bit of a truce, perhaps? She held her breath, anticipating a refusal. There was a moment of silence on the other end, a pause pregnant with Serafina's internal calculations. Eleanor could practically hear the gears turning in her daughter-in-law's cunning mind. Why was Eleanor, the dignified, quietly disapproving mother-in-law, suddenly extending an olive branch? Serafina, ever the manipulator, would likely see this as an opportunity to gloat, to subtly reinforce her perceived victory, or perhaps even to gauge Eleanor's true intentions regarding the failed car sabotage. Or maybe, just maybe, she was feeling particularly confident now that her grander plan for Owen was supposedly in motion. Coffee? Serafina finally purred, a hint of amusement in her tone. Well, Eleanor, that's certainly unexpected, but I suppose a truce wouldn't go amiss. Very well. The Cafe Luna on 5th Street, 8:30 a.m. It's conveniently close to the courthouse. Perfect, Eleanor replied, feigning a relief she was far from feeling. I'll see you then. She hung up, a cold shiver running down her spine despite the successful outcome of the call. Immediately, she dialed Daniel. She agreed, Cafe Luna, 8:30 a.m. Daniel let out a low whistle. All right, Auntie. That's a brave move. You sure you want to face her directly after everything? I have to, Daniel, Eleanor stated, her voice firm. Serafina needs to know her plan has failed, and she needs to understand that I'm not going to let her hurt Owen. She thinks she's untouchable, that she's outsmarted everyone. I need to be the one to disabuse her of that notion. Daniel paused. I understand. I'll make sure to be in the area, just in case. Don't worry, Aunt Eleanor. We're with you every step of the way. Later that night, alone in the quiet solitude of her home, Eleanor questioned her own bravery. A woman willing to pay $20,000 to brain damage her own husband, to destroy an innocent family to get what she wanted, was capable of anything. She was a sociopath devoid of empathy, driven by a terrifying blend of greed and malice. Eleanor knew she was walking into a lion's den, but as she thought of Owen, of Lily, and of the justice that needed to be served, a renewed sense of purpose hardened her resolve. She would face Serafina, and she would win. The morning sun, usually a welcome sight, felt like a spotlight as Eleanor approached Cafe Luna. She arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a small, round table near the window, ensuring she had a clear view of the entrance and was herself visible to anyone passing by. It was a strategic choice, a subtle declaration that she had nothing to hide. She ordered a black coffee, her hands steady as she gripped the warm mug, though her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Daniel was nearby, a silent, unseen guardian, and that brought a measure of calm. Precisely at 8:30 a.m., Serafina swept into the cafe, a vision of polished elegance in a crisp white pantsuit. She looked as though she'd just stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine, utterly composed, her blonde hair gleaming, her smile perfectly practiced. Eleanor, darling, she cooed, her voice a little too sweet, a little too saccharine as she approached the table. Fancy meeting you here. Her eyes, however, held a predatory glint, betraying the feigned cordiality. Eleanor didn't bother with pleasantries. She met Serafina's gaze directly, her own expression unyielding. Serafina, she said, her voice low and steady, I thought it was time we were honest with each other. Truly honest about what you really want and what you are willing to do to get it. Serafina's fake smile wavered slightly. I'm not sure what you mean, Eleanor. My demands in the divorce are quite clear, and I certainly don't appreciate the implication. Eleanor took a slow sip of her coffee, letting the silence stretch for a moment, enjoying the subtle tightening of Serafina's jaw. Let's be very clear then, Eleanor continued, setting her mug down with a soft clink. I know about Ben Carter. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Serafina's face drained of color, turning a ghastly white, far more pronounced than it had been in the courtroom lobby. Her perfect composure shattered, the practiced smile dissolving into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock and fury. For a terrifying second, Eleanor saw Serafina for who she truly was, cold, calculating, and absolutely ruthless. The carefully constructed facade had evaporated, revealing the viper beneath. Ben who? Serafina stammered, her voice thin, a desperate attempt at denial. I don't know anyone by that name. You're losing your mind, Eleanor. Don't bother, Serafina, Eleanor cut in, her voice unwavering. It won't work. $20,000, Serafina. That's a lot of money to pay someone for a simple car repair, wouldn't you say? Serafina recoiled as if struck. She opened her mouth to speak, but Eleanor pressed on, relentless. I know you tried to have my brakes sabotaged. I know you approached Arthur first, then found Ben Carter. I know you threatened Ben with exposure to the police if he didn't help you. Eleanor paused, letting each accusation land like a precise blow. And I know about your plan for tonight, for Owen. Serafina's eyes, narrowed to slits, darted around the cafe, a desperate animal trapped in a corner. You have no proof, she hissed, her voice barely a whisper, thick with venom. It's your word against mine, a disgruntled mother-in-law trying to undermine her son's divorce settlement. She tried to regain control, to reassert her dominance, but her hands were trembling, betraying her. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, chilling tone that held no room for argument. Lily Carter would believe me, Serafina. She's the one who warned me about my car. She heard every word of your conversation with her father, every single horrifying detail of your plan for Owen. She knows everything. The name Lily Carter was the decisive blow. Serafina's composure finally, irrevocably shattered. A guttural growl escaped her lips, and her eyes blazed with a terrifying primal rage. She slammed her palm on the table, making the coffee cups jump. Owen was never supposed to divorce me, she spat, her voice rising, drawing a few curious glances from other patrons. I had plans. I invested 3 years of my life in that marriage, and I'm not walking away with nothing. Her voice was thick with self-pity and entitlement, utterly devoid of any recognition of her own monstrous actions. She leaned across the table, her face contorted with malice. He would have been taken care of, she snarled, her words chillingly devoid of remorse. He would have needed me to make decisions for him, to manage his assets. Everything would have been mine. Legally, it would have been perfect. The casual way she admitted to her intention to incapacitate her own husband, to render him a helpless invalid for financial gain, sent a fresh wave of nausea through Eleanor. Call him, Eleanor demanded, her voice cutting through Serafina's hateful tirade. Call Ben Carter, now, and cancel the job. All of it. Serafina stared at her, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her chest heaving. She looked like she wanted to lunge across the table and physically attack Eleanor. But the mention of Lily, the irrefutable witness, had broken her. Eleanor slowly pulled out her phone, unlocking it. She displayed the screen to Serafina. On it, a text message was drafted, ready to send. The recipient was Detective Miller of the Metro Police Department. The message detailed attempted murder, conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm, and witness intimidation, naming Serafina Vance, and outlining the sabotaged car and the plot against Owen Vance. Serafina's eyes darted from the text message to Eleanor's face, then back again. The fury remained, but a desperate, calculating fear had begun to creep in. Prison. Her carefully constructed world, her image, her freedom, all of it teetering on the edge of destruction. With a trembling hand, Serafina fumbled for her own phone. She dialed Ben Carter, her face a mask of bitter resentment. It's off, she snapped into the phone, her voice barely controlled. The job is off. Do you hear me? Cancel everything. I'll be in touch. She slammed the phone down, then glared at Eleanor with an intensity of pure, undiluted hatred that made Eleanor's skin crawl. Now for the rest of it, Eleanor said, her voice clear and decisive. You will accept the judge's settlement without appeal. You will disappear from our lives forever. You will never contact Owen or me or anyone in our family again. If you so much as breathe in our direction, that text message goes, and you will spend 10 to 20 years in prison. Do we understand each other? Serafina's chest heaved. She looked utterly defeated, yet still simmering with rage. She stared at Eleanor for a long, agonizing moment. Then suddenly, with a snarl of pure frustration, she shoved her chair back with such force that it toppled over with a crash. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed out of the cafe, leaving a trail of stunned silence and a quiet sense of triumph in her wake. Eleanor watched her go, then finally allowed herself to exhale. The first battle was won. Eleanor wasn't naive. Serafina was a predator, cunning and ruthless, and Eleanor knew that while she might have won this battle, the war wasn't truly over until Serafina was out of their lives for good. Even after Serafina stormed out of the Café Luna, a chilling sense of unease lingered. Eleanor made one more call, her voice low and steady, confirming that all precautions were in place, implicitly to Daniel and the plan he and Ben had set in motion to ensure Owen's safety that night. At the final court hearing, Serafina appeared, but she was a shadow of her former self. The impeccable facade had crumbled, replaced by a visible weariness that seemed to have aged her 10 years overnight. Her eyes were dull, her movements stiff, and the usual spark of defiant arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen resentment. Her lawyer, Mr. Julian Reed, usually a blustering advocate for Serafina's outrageous demands, approached Owen's table with a surprising request for a private conference. Eleanor and Owen exchanged a confused glance. When they returned, Mr. Reed, looking equally bewildered, outlined a new settlement. Serafina accepted almost nothing, just enough for moving expenses and 6 months of temporary support. No exorbitant alimony, no claims on Owen's premarital assets. It was an unconditional surrender. Owen was utterly bewildered, his brow furrowed in confusion. He had braced himself for another bitter, drawn-out fight, expecting Serafina to drag them through every legal loophole. But this was unprecedented. Eleanor, keeping her expression neutral, simply offered a small, knowing smile to Miss Sharma. Miss Sharma, the secret, the dark, horrifying truth of Serafina's attempts remained locked within Eleanor, a burden she bore to protect her son. Judge Thompson, clearly surprised by the sudden, amicable resolution, quickly finalized the divorce. 3 years of a tumultuous marriage and months of brutal legal battles came to a quiet, almost anticlimactic end. The gavel's final rap echoed through the courtroom, sealing Owen's freedom. As Serafina gathered her belongings, she approached Owen one last time. Her voice was hollow and tremulous, her eyes brimming with what appeared to be genuine tears. "I'm so sorry, Owen, for everything," she whispered, her hands clasped together. "I know I haven't been the wife you deserved. I truly hope you find happiness." For a fleeting moment, Eleanor almost felt a pang of pity for her. Serafina was a master manipulator, and this was her final, desperate act to retain some semblance of victimhood. But then, the memory of Lily's frightened face, her small voice whispering of Serafina's monstrous plan, flashed in Eleanor's mind. She remembered Ben's anguished confession, trapped between the law and his love for his daughter. All pity instantly evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Serafina's tears were crocodile tears, shed not for Owen's pain, but for her own lost gains. Without another word, Serafina turned and walked out of the courtroom, disappearing from their lives, Eleanor hoped, forever. That evening, Owen and Eleanor celebrated his newfound freedom at their favorite Italian restaurant. Owen still seemed dying, unable to comprehend the sudden shift in Serafina's demands. "I just don't get it, Mom," he confessed, swirling his pasta around his fork. "What changed? One minute she's out for blood, the next she's practically giving everything away." Eleanor carefully deflected his questions, attributing Serafina's sudden change to fear. "Sometimes, dear, people realize when they're truly cornered. She probably saw the writing on the wall, realized the judge wasn't going to look kindly on her excessive demands. Maybe she just feared the consequences of dragging this out any longer." It wasn't entirely a lie. Serafina had indeed been cornered, and the consequences Eleanor had presented were very real. But the full, terrifying truth was a secret Eleanor knew she must keep. A week later, a small, clean, and noticeably happier Lily appeared at Eleanor's doorstep, her bright eyes shining. In her hand, she clutched a neatly folded handwritten note. It was from Ben Carter. The note, scrawled in a rough but earnest hand, expressed his profound gratitude. He wrote that he had found the courage to go legitimate. Thanks to Daniel's intervention and Arthur's generosity, Ben had secured a job at Arthur's Auto Repair. He was starting over, clean, for Lily. Lily, beaming, hugged Eleanor tightly. "Daddy says thank you," she chirped, "and he says sometimes doing the right thing is scary, but you gotta do it anyway." Eleanor hugged her back, her eyes welling up with tears of joy and relief. The ripple effect of Lily's courage and their collective actions was truly beautiful. Later that day, Daniel called with an update. "Good news, Aunt E. Serafina Vance is officially out of the picture. She booked a one-way ticket to Phoenix and left yesterday. Given the circumstances, I don't think she'll be coming back. But Daniel also had some chilling information to share. I did a deeper dive on Serafina Vance, like you asked. It turns out she was married once before. Her previous husband, a wealthy businessman, died in a suspicious car accident about 5 years ago, not long after she took out a very large life insurance policy on him. The investigation was inconclusive, ruled an accident, but the insurance company found enough reason to deny the payout. Eleanor's blood ran cold. A suspicious car accident, a large life insurance policy. It was a pattern. Serafina wasn't just a greedy opportunist. She was a serial predator. Owen and Eleanor herself had come terrifyingly close to being her next victims. The realization sent a shiver of dread down her spine, followed by a surge of profound gratitude. How close they had come to disaster, saved only by the extraordinary courage of a little girl and the quick thinking of a loyal family. The following Thursday, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Owen. "Mom," he said, his voice cheerful, "I'm canceling my poker game tonight. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner. I want to spend more time with you. I really appreciate everything you've done for me through all this." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "I'd love that, Owen," she replied, her heart full. Later, as she prepared for dinner, Eleanor looked at her reflection in the mirror. The past few weeks had left their mark. There were new lines around her eyes, a faint shadow of the stress she'd endured, but her eyes, once clouded with worry, were now clear, bright, and peaceful. She had protected her son. She had helped Ben and Lily find a new path. She had faced true evil and emerged victorious. Her strength, her quiet determination, had been tested, and she had not faltered. She would keep the dark secret from Owen. Some secrets, she understood, were worth keeping, not for her own benefit, but to protect the people you love from horrors they didn't need to bear. It was a quiet triumph of good over evil, a testament to courage, and a reminder that even in the darkest of times, light can shine through the most unexpected sources. The days that followed Serafina's abrupt departure settled into a quiet rhythm, a stark contrast to the frantic chaos that had preceded them. Yet, despite the newfound peace, a lingering shadow remained, cast by Daniel's chilling revelation about Serafina's past. A wealthy husband, a suspicious car accident, an unpaid life insurance policy. The pattern was sickeningly clear. Eleanor replayed it in her mind, the pieces of Serafina's calculated malice clicking into place with a horrifying precision. This wasn't a desperate act of a woman scorned. This was a well-honed modus operandi, a predator's signature. Eleanor sat in her sun-drenched living room, a cup of tea cooling beside her, gazing out at her perfectly manicured garden. The world outside seemed oblivious to the darkness she now carried within her. She had saved Owen, yes, but at what cost? The weight of the secret pressed down on her, a heavy, cold stone in her heart. How could she ever tell her son that the woman he had loved, the woman he had married, was not only a calculating liar but a serial black widow? The thought was unbearable. Owen was finally beginning to heal, to shed the crushing stress of the divorce. To shatter that fragile peace with such a grotesque truth felt cruel, an act of destruction she simply could not commit. But keeping it was a different kind of burden. It was a deception, however well-intentioned. It meant enduring the knowledge alone, vigilant and watchful, forever scanning the horizon for a ghost that might return. She often found herself staring at Owen when he visited, searching his features for any lingering trace of pain, any sign that he suspected the true depths of Serafina's depravity. He seemed lighter, more like his old self, laughing more freely, his eyes regaining their spark. And in those moments, Eleanor knew she had made the right choice. His peace, his ability to move forward unburdened by such a terrifying truth, was paramount. A week after the final hearing, Lily and Ben came to visit. Ben, looking surprisingly neat in a clean work shirt, had brought Lily to show Eleanor his gratitude. Lily, scrubbed clean and beaming, held Eleanor's hand, telling her about her new school, the friends she was making, and how much she loved helping her daddy at Mr. Arthur's big shop. Ben, though still reserved, met Eleanor's gaze with profound appreciation. "Arthur's given me a real chance, Eleanor," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "And Daniel, He helped me get all my paperwork straight, no more looking over my shoulder. It's all thanks to you and Lily. Seeing the tangible, positive impact of her actions was a powerful affirmation. It was a tangible victory, a small family unit salvaged from the wreckage Serafina had intended to create. It reminded Eleanor that while evil was insidious, good, when acted upon with courage, could truly change lives. Lily's bright, innocent face, devoid of the fear she had carried, was a balm to Eleanor's soul, a testament to the fragile beauty of life that Serafina had so carelessly threatened. Owen, true to his word, had been spending more time with Eleanor. Their bond, which had always been strong, seemed to deepen in the aftermath of the storm. He talked about his work, his hopes for the future, and sometimes tentatively about what he looked for in a relationship now. Eleanor listened, offered gentle advice, and found immense satisfaction in their renewed connection. He never spoke of Serafina with bitterness, only a quiet acceptance that she was simply not the person he thought she was. Eleanor cherished these moments, these quiet affirmations of life moving forward, unmarred by the lurking darkness she alone was privy to. Yet a part of her remained watchful. Could Serafina truly be gone forever? Would her shadow ever fully lift? Eleanor knew the type. They didn't simply vanish without a trace, nor did they change their stripes. They merely sought new hunting grounds. The thought was a chilling undercurrent beneath the surface of her new peace. She found herself scanning faces in crowds, paying closer attention to news reports about unsolved mysteries. Her mind subtly attuned to the dark underbelly of human nature that she had been forced to confront. One afternoon, while watching the local news, a report flashed across the screen about an unsolved cold case from a neighboring state. A wealthy widow whose husband had died in a suspicious hunting accident years ago, his death leaving her in sole control of his estate. The details were vague, but the headline sparked an immediate cold recognition in Eleanor's gut. She knew the pattern now. She knew the darkness that could lurk beneath a polished surface. It was a fleeting thought, a distant echo of the past, but it served as a stark reminder. Even with Serafina physically gone, the knowledge of her kind, of the insidious nature of evil, had fundamentally changed Eleanor's perception of the world. She was no longer just a grandmother in her quiet suburban home. She was a woman who had faced death, outmaneuvered a predator, and emerged stronger, wiser, and forever vigilant. Despite this lingering awareness, Eleanor found comfort and strength in her renewed connection with Owen, in Lily's laughter, and in Ben's honest efforts. Her quiet triumph wasn't a flamboyant celebration, but a deep, abiding sense of purpose fulfilled. She had protected her son, she had helped an innocent child and her father, and she had discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed. The secret she carried was heavy, but it was a burden she bore willingly, a silent testament to a mother's fierce, protective love. For Owen's sake, and for her own hard-won peace, she would keep the dark shadows of Serafina's true nature hidden, allowing her son to build a future free from the terror she had narrowly averted. The world for Eleanor had irrevocably changed. The quiet tranquility of her life, once taken for granted, was now viewed through a lens of heightened awareness. She found herself more observant of people, instinctively categorizing them into trustworthy or suspicious, their smiles scrutinized, their words weighed for hidden meanings. It wasn't paranoia, not exactly, but a permanent shift in her perspective, a vigilant undercurrent that now flowed beneath the surface of her daily life. The ease with which Serafina had concealed her true nature had left an indelible mark, teaching Eleanor that evil wasn't always a monstrous caricature. Often it was cunning, persuasive, and hid in plain sight behind perfectly applied false eyelashes. She noticed the small, subtle changes in her routine. She checked her locks twice before bed, scanned her rearview mirror a little longer, and was more particular about who she invited into her home. It wasn't a conscious effort to be wary. It had simply become second nature, an unconscious vigilance forged in the crucible of fear. She rarely drove her own car alone at night, preferring to use ride-sharing services, a small concession to the lingering memory of sabotaged brake lines. Daniel, true to his word, continued to check in regularly. His calls were often casual, disguised as family catch-ups. But Eleanor knew the deeper reason. He was her unseen guardian, his quiet presence reinforcing her sense of security, yet also subtly reminding her that the lingering threat, though distant, was not entirely forgotten. He would offer updates on Ben and Lily, always positive, always reassuring, but never once did he mention Serafina's name unless Eleanor brought it up. It was a silent acknowledgement of the darkness they shared, a bond forged in a crisis. Eleanor, for her part, had quietly, anonymously established a fund for Lily's education and well-being. It was her way of repaying a debt that could never truly be measured, a silent promise to the brave little girl who had given her a second chance at life. She saw it as both an act of profound gratitude and an investment in good, hoping to provide Lily with opportunities that her difficult start in life might otherwise deny her. Knowing that Lily was safe, thriving, and had a brighter future ahead was a profound source of peace for Eleanor. Owen, oblivious to the intricate web of protection spun around him, was thriving. He immersed himself in his business, his energy renewed, his focus sharp. He had even started dating casually, slowly opening himself up to new possibilities. Eleanor watched him, her heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. She knew that the subtle measures she took, Daniel's watchful eye, her own heightened caution, the quiet understanding she shared with Arthur, were all part of keeping him safe, allowing him to grow and heal without the dark cloud of Serafina's true nature hanging over him. Her relationship with Arthur had also deepened significantly. He had become a quiet confidant, someone who understood the silent gravity of her secret without needing to be told everything. When she occasionally brought her car in for routine maintenance, their conversations often drifted beyond mechanics, a shared understanding passing between them in glances and unspoken words. He knew what she had faced, and she trusted him implicitly, a rare and precious connection in a world that now seemed full of hidden depths. One afternoon, while browsing a news site, Eleanor stumbled upon an article detailing a woman's harrowing experience with a manipulative partner who had slowly, subtly attempted to isolate her and gain control of her finances. The story, while not as overtly violent as Serafina's plot, resonated deeply with Eleanor. It sparked a profound empathy within her, solidifying her understanding that Serafina was not an anomaly, but a chilling example of a larger, insidious pattern of human behavior. It reaffirmed her belief that vigilance and the courage to act on intuition were essential tools in navigating a world that often concealed its dangers behind attractive facades. Eleanor often found herself reflecting on the nature of evil. It wasn't the theatrical villain of movies, but a cold, calculating force that could wear a beautiful smile, speak in sweet tones, and weave intricate webs of deception. It was the ability to dehumanize others, to see them as mere pawns in a larger game of self-gratification. And in doing so, it often underestimated the very human qualities it sought to exploit: love, loyalty, and the fierce protective instinct of a mother. She recognized the vital importance of community and unexpected allies. Lily, the child hero; Ben, the father forced into a corner; Arthur, the honest mechanic; and Daniel, her resourceful nephew. They were her unsung heroes, a testament to the power of human connection in the face of isolation and malice. They had formed an unlikely alliance, a small, courageous band against a formidable foe, and in doing so had redefined what it meant to be a family. The lasting impact of the ordeal was undeniable. Eleanor had lost a certain innocence, a comfortable belief in the inherent goodness of people. But in its place, she had gained something far more valuable: a profound wisdom, an unshakable inner strength, and a clear-eyed understanding of the world's complexities. This newfound resilience, this quiet but fierce determination, would define her going forward. She had survived, not just physically, but emotionally, emerging from the darkness a stronger, more complete woman, forever grateful for the light that had pierced through her darkest hour. Months melted into a new season, and with the passage of time, the initial sharp edges of fear began to soften for Eleanor. The raw terror of Serafina's plot had receded, becoming a more distant, though ever-present memory. The vigilance, however, remained. It was a quiet hum beneath her consciousness, an ingrained habit that ensured she was never truly caught off guard. Life, in its stubborn way, continued to move forward, and Eleanor found herself adapting to its new contours. Owen, to Eleanor's quiet relief, gradually began dating again. He approached it cautiously, almost tentatively, as if burned by his past experience. His choices were noticeably different. He seemed to seek genuine connection, thoughtfulness, and warmth, rather than the superficial charm and dazzling allure that Serafina had so expertly wielded. Eleanor watched him, her heart aching for the innocence he had lost, but also swelling with hope for the happiness he deserved. Her protective instinct, however, was now deeply embedded. Eleanor found herself subtly scrutinizing Owen's dates, her eyes sharp, her mind sifting through every word and gesture, searching for any red flags. She couldn't help it. The specter of Serafina had forever altered her perception of trust. She often shared her observations with Daniel, framing them as lighthearted commentary, but Daniel, ever perceptive, understood the deeper concern that fueled her vigilance. He would listen patiently, offering reassurances but never dismissing her feelings. Then one particular woman began to spend more time with Owen. Her name was Clara, an architect with a warm, genuine smile and a thoughtful, engaging demeanor. From the first time Owen introduced them, Eleanor observed Clara with the ingrained suspicion born from Serafina's betrayal. She watched for any flicker of avarice in her eyes, listened for any subtly manipulative undertone in her voice, and analyzed every interaction for signs of hidden agendas. Eleanor had learned the hard way that true darkness could hide behind a radiant smile. But as weeks turned into months, Clara consistently demonstrated a genuine kindness that was hard to fault. She was intelligent, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in Owen's life, his passions, and even his mundane day-to-day. Crucially, she displayed a refreshing disinterest in Owen's wealth. She spoke of her own career with passion, lived comfortably on her own means, and never once hinted at a desire for anything beyond the shared experiences she had with Owen. Slowly, tentatively, Clara began to earn Eleanor's hesitant approval. Clara often brought small, considerate gifts for Eleanor when she visited. A unique blend of tea, a rare paperback, a small flowering plant for her garden. But more than the gifts, it was Clara's thoughtful presence that began to melt Eleanor's reserve. She would engage Eleanor in conversation about her hobbies, ask for her opinions on various topics, and genuinely listen to her responses. It was a stark contrast to Serafina, who had treated Eleanor as little more than an inconvenience or a prop in her grand performance. Eleanor found herself having genuinely pleasant conversations with Clara, a simple joy she hadn't realized she had missed. Despite this growing fondness, despite the increasingly positive feelings, the ingrained caution remained. Eleanor knew she couldn't allow herself to be fully swayed by charm alone, not after what she and Owen had endured. One quiet afternoon, she called Daniel. "Daniel," she began, a slight flush rising on her cheeks. "Owen is seeing someone. Her name is Clara. She seems lovely. But, well, you understand, don't you?" Daniel understood immediately. "A background check on Eleanor?" he asked gently. "Yes," she admitted, relief flooding her voice that she didn't have to fully articulate her irrational fears. "Just a discreet one. For my peace of mind, for Owen's safety, after everything." "Say no more, Aunt Eleanor," Daniel reassured her. "I'll get right on it. You deserve to have that peace of mind, and Owen deserves to be safe." He agreed without question, recognizing not a lack of trust in Clara, but the deep protective instincts of a mother who had stared evil in the face. Eleanor continued to monitor Clara, not with malice or suspicion in her heart, but with a cautious hope. She watched how Clara interacted with Owen, with Lily, who sometimes joined them at Arthur's shop, and with the few friends Owen had slowly brought back into his life. Each observation reinforced the growing belief that Clara was, indeed, a truly good person. The emotional scars left by Serafina were deep. They had made Eleanor more cynical, yes, but they had also sharpened her appreciation for true goodness, for honesty, and for genuine affection. She was learning to trust again, cautiously, and in doing so, she found a glimmer of hope that Owen might, at last, find the lasting happiness he so richly deserved. The shadow of Serafina still lingered, but it was slowly, steadily, being outshone by the growing light of new connections. A few weeks after Eleanor had asked Daniel to discreetly check into Clara, the phone rang, pulling her from a peaceful afternoon of gardening. It was Daniel, and his tone immediately set Eleanor's teeth on edge. It was serious, urgent, cutting through the calm she had so painstakingly built. "Aunt Eleanor," he began without preamble, "I've got an update for you, 2 updates, actually." Eleanor's heart began to pound, a familiar, unwelcome drumbeat of anxiety. "Go on, Daniel." "First, the good news," he said, and Eleanor could hear a hint of relief in his voice. "Clara's background check came back completely clean. No skeletons in the closet, solid professional history, good reputation, no financial anomalies. She's exactly who she says she is, and genuinely seems like a wonderful woman. Owen's made a good choice, Aunt E. You can breathe easy on that front." A profound wave of relief washed over Eleanor, so strong it almost made her weak in the knees. A genuine smile touched her lips. "Oh, Daniel, that's wonderful news. Truly, I was so hoping. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Daniel's voice turned grave, the lightness gone. "Now for the other update, the one that's not so good. Serafina has returned." Eleanor's breath hitched. Her worst fears, the nagging suspicion that had lurked beneath her newfound peace, were confirmed. Serafina. Back. The name was a cold knot in her stomach, a resurgence of the dread she had fought so hard to banish. "Where?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "One of my contacts spotted her in the next city over, about an hour's drive from you," Daniel explained. "Initially, it seemed she was laying low, working as a waitress in a small diner. A far cry from her previous lifestyle, certainly. My contact thought it was odd, but then remembered your warning about her being subtle." "Working as a waitress?" Eleanor almost scoffed. "Serafina, serving coffee?" It seemed almost laughable, a stark contrast to the designer suits and high society gatherings she had once inhabited. But then a cold clarity settled over Eleanor. This was Serafina. She was never truly subdued. This apparent demotion, this seemingly legitimate front, felt like a deliberate strategy, a way to disappear and regroup. "But it gets more interesting," Daniel continued, his voice lowering. "My contact observed her during her break. She met with someone, a man, described him as slick and well-dressed, but with cold eyes. Definitely not someone who looked like a regular at that diner or a colleague. They spoke for a while, very discreetly, before he left." Eleanor closed her eyes, a familiar surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was it. This was Serafina's pattern. The seemingly legitimate front. The clandestine meeting with a shady character. She was plotting again. Eleanor could feel it in her bones, a primal instinct screaming danger. The initial calm was shattered, replaced by a sharp, focused resolve. "I knew it," Eleanor murmured, her voice tight with a mixture of anger and grim satisfaction at her vindicated vigilance. "She never truly gives up. She just retreats to plan her next move." "Exactly," Daniel confirmed. "I've already activated my network in that city. My people will be monitoring her closely, discreetly, of course. We'll find out who this man is and what she's up to. I'll keep you updated, Aunt E, the moment I have anything concrete." "Thank you, Daniel," Eleanor said, a genuine gratitude in her voice. "Be careful." As she hung up, the weight of the past week's peace lifted, replaced by a familiar burden of vigilance. Eleanor knew she couldn't let her guard down, not with Serafina back in play. The emotional toll of this constant watchfulness, the never-ending need to anticipate and protect, was immense. It was exhausting, a silent battle waged within her own mind. But then she thought of Owen, of his newfound happiness with Clara, of Lily's bright future. And in that thought, her commitment solidified once more. She would do whatever it took to protect them. Eleanor's quiet moments were now once again filled with planning and strategy. She mentally rehearsed scenarios, considering Serafina's likely motives, her potential targets. Was it Owen again? Or had she set her sights on a new victim? Eleanor knew she had to be one step ahead, to anticipate the twisted machinations of Serafina's mind. She confided in Arthur during her next visit to his shop, speaking in hushed tones, her voice heavy with the news. Arthur listened gravely, his face creased with concern. "That woman," he muttered, shaking his head. "Like a bad penny. Don't you worry, Eleanor. We'll keep our eyes open. And you just let me know if you need anything, anything at all." His unwavering support was a comfort, a quiet promise of solidarity in the face of renewed threat. Eleanor walked out of Arthur's shop, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery hues, a stark contrast to the renewed chill in her heart. The peace she had cultivated was fragile, built on the assumption that Serafina was gone for good. But Serafina's return meant the fight was far from over. Her vigilance, once a heavy burden she yearned to shed, was now a proven necessity. She was a guardian, whether she wanted to be or not, and she would stand firm. Days stretched into a tense week, each passing hour feeling like a countdown. Eleanor's phone, once a source of comfort, now vibrated with a constant, low-level anxiety. Every time it rang, her heart leaped, anticipating Daniel's voice and the next piece of the puzzle. When the call finally came, his tone was grim. "On Eleanor, I have some critical information," Daniel said, his voice clipped and serious. "The man Serafina was meeting? We've identified him. His name is Marcus Thorne, and he's a notorious con artist." Eleanor's gut churned, a cold wave of dread washing over her. A con artist. This was a new, insidious twist, far more complex than simple sabotage. "What kind of con artist?" she asked, her voice tight. "Elaborate financial scams," Daniel explained. "He specializes in targeting wealthy individuals, charming his way into their trust, and then systematically bankrupting them through fake investment opportunities. He's a master manipulator, highly intelligent, and very dangerous. He makes Serafina look like an amateur." Eleanor closed her eyes, a horrifying realization dawning on her. Serafina wasn't just aiming for Owen's personal assets anymore. She was aiming for his business, his entire professional life. Her tech startup, the one he had poured his heart and soul into, was currently thriving, but it was also in a vulnerable growth phase. It required careful investment, strategic partnerships, and expansion plans that could easily be exploited. This was Serafina's ultimate revenge, to ruin Owen financially and professionally, to strip him of everything he had built, leaving him utterly destitute and helpless. "He creates fake investment opportunities," Eleanor repeated, her mind racing. "Manipulates victims into transferring assets." The words painted a terrifying picture. Owen, with his innate trust and his eagerness to grow his company, would be a prime target. "Exactly," Daniel confirmed. "Thorne is known for setting up dummy corporations, fabricating impressive-looking portfolios, and using complex legal structures to make it all appear legitimate. By the time the victims realize they've been swindled, their money is gone, untraceable." Eleanor felt a cold dread settle deep in her bones. This was far more sophisticated than simply tampering with a car. This was a calculated, long-term assault on Owen's entire future. "There's more," Daniel continued, his voice lowering. "Serafina and Thorne have been observed frequently near Owen's office building. And not just that, they've also been seen near the prestigious investment firm Owen has recently been consulting, the one he mentioned wanting to partner with for his next round of funding." Eleanor's fear intensified, sharp and piercing. They weren't just observing, they were planning a direct infiltration. They were going to insert Thorne into Owen's professional life, masquerading as a legitimate investor or advisor, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Owen, blinded by his trust and ambition, would walk right into their trap. The urgency of the situation pressed down on Eleanor. She had to warn Owen. But how? How could she tell him without revealing the dark, devastating truth about Serafina's attempted murder? A truth she was desperately trying to shield him from? To confess now would be to shatter the fragile peace he had finally found, to plunge him back into a nightmare that would leave him utterly broken. She considered her options, each one fraught with risk. A direct warning unsupported by the full truth would likely be dismissed as overprotective motherly paranoia, or worse, as a vindictive attempt to interfere in his business. Owen respected her opinion, but he was also a proud, independent man. He might even resent her intrusion, pushing her away at a time when he needed her most. She couldn't risk that. She couldn't risk him thinking she was merely trying to control him. Eleanor sat for a long time grappling with the dilemma. Then a subtle strategy began to form in her mind. She would have to be indirect, plant seeds of doubt, raise his awareness without ever mentioning Serafina's name or the true extent of the danger. She decided to subtly introduce the topic of investment scams into their conversations. She would bring up cautionary tales she'd read in the news, discuss the importance of due diligence, and emphasize the cunning of financial fraudsters. She hoped to arm him with knowledge to subtly guide him to exercise extreme caution with any new investment opportunities, especially those that seemed too good to be true. Eleanor also realized she needed an ally within Owen's inner circle, someone he trusted implicitly. Clara, Owen's new girlfriend, the architect with the warm smile and thoughtful demeanor, was perfect. Clara was intelligent, respected Owen's professional judgment, and was aware of his business dealings. Eleanor knew she could trust Clara. She called Clara later that evening, inviting her for tea. Over delicate pastries, Eleanor carefully broached the subject, framing it as a general concern. Clara, dear, Owen has been talking so much about his expansion plans, and he's so passionate about his work. He's such a brilliant mind, but sometimes I worry he can be a little too trusting. She then spoke of her general worries about the aggressive nature of the investment world, mentioning new types of scams targeting successful startups. Clara, perceptive and empathetic, listened intently. I understand completely, Eleanor, she said, her expression thoughtful. It's a tough world out there. I'll definitely keep an eye out, discreetly of course, for any suspicious individuals or unusually aggressive investment pitches that seem out of character for the firms he's working with. Her promise brought Eleanor a measure of comfort. Eleanor felt the pressure mounting, a cold, hard knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Serafina and Thorn were closing in. The game had truly escalated. She had to act quickly, subtly, and with absolute precision to protect Owen's future, his legacy, and his very financial existence, all while keeping the darkest secrets of her past safely hidden. Her vigilance, once a shield against physical harm, now had to become a weapon against unseen financial destruction. The game had irrevocably changed. Eleanor and Daniel now faced a new, more intricate opponent in Marcus Thorne, a master of deception. Their strategy had to be equally sophisticated. They spent hours on the phone, meticulously strategizing how to expose Thorne and Serafina without implicating Owen in any way, and crucially, without revealing Serafina's past attempted murder. The goal was to dismantle their scheme and protect Owen's future, not to relive old traumas. Daniel, utilizing his extensive network, immediately set up covert surveillance around Owen's office building and the prestigious investment firm he was courting. His team was looking for patterns, for connections, hoping to catch Thorne and Serafina in a compromising position or to gather irrefutable evidence of their intent. This wasn't about catching them in a single act. It was about building a case, piece by careful piece. Eleanor, meanwhile, continued her subtle campaign with Owen. Over dinners, during casual phone calls, she would artfully weave in cautionary tales. I was reading an article today, Owen, she might start, about these incredibly clever investment scams. People lose everything because they're so eager for a good return that they don't do their homework. She emphasized the importance of thorough due diligence, of checking references, verifying every single detail, no matter how legitimate an opportunity might seem. She spoke of red flags, overly aggressive pitches, promises of unrealistic returns, and a rush to close deals. Owen, still subconsciously attuned to her maternal warnings from the brake sabotage incident, listened attentively, absorbing the information like a sponge. Clara, acting on Eleanor's discreet request, became an invaluable asset. Her observant nature and genuine concern for Owen made her the perfect, unsuspecting scout. She began to notice a slick, overly charming man making frequent, seemingly coincidental appearances at Owen's office building and at the various professional networking events Owen attended. This man, Marcus Thorne, possessed an almost magnetic personality, effortlessly inserting himself into conversations, always appearing just at the right moment. Clara felt an instinctive prickle of unease. His friendliness felt forced. His interest in Owen's startup seemed too good to be true, and his omnipresence was starting to feel less like coincidence and more like calculated stalking. One evening over dinner, Clara confided in Owen. You know, Owen, she began, her brows slightly furrowed, that Marcus Thorne fellow? He seems to be everywhere you are, and he's awfully eager to get your attention. I just have a strange feeling about him. His charm feels a little performative. Owen, whose awareness had been subtly raised by Eleanor's consistent warnings, felt a prickle of unease himself. He had been polite to Thorne, even intrigued by some of his seemingly insightful comments about the market, but Clara's words, combined with his mother's recent advice, resonated. He started to pay closer attention, to notice the subtle inconsistencies in Thorne's stories, the way his eyes never quite matched his charming smile. The seeds of caution Eleanor had planted were beginning to sprout. Meanwhile, Daniel's surveillance began to pay off. His team captured a series of damning photos. Serafina and Thorne meeting in a secluded park, bent over documents that, upon closer inspection, appeared to be forged financial statements related to Owen's company. They looked like manipulated projections, designed to lure in an unsuspecting investor. Daniel's tech experts also managed to intercept coded communications between Serafina and Thorne, veiled messages discussing acquisition targets and asset liquidation, leaving no doubt about their intent to defraud Owen and systematically dismantle his company. The evidence was building, solidifying into an irrefutable case. Eleanor knew it was time for the final, critical push. She had Clara arrange a chance meeting for Owen with a trusted financial forensics expert, a contact of Daniel's, at an upcoming industry event Owen was attending. Eleanor provided Clara with the subtle cues to give the expert, ensuring he would subtly guide the conversation. At the event, the expert, a seasoned professional with years of experience uncovering white-collar crime, gave an impromptu talk on detecting sophisticated investment fraud. He spoke of the precise tactics Thorne employed, the fabricated track records, the pressure to commit quickly, the use of shell companies, the aggressive charm masking predatory intent. Owen listened, rapt, unknowingly receiving a masterclass in the very scheme being cooked up against him. He left the event feeling a knot of genuine apprehension, the expert's words echoing Eleanor's subtle warnings. Eleanor and Daniel now had everything they needed: the photos, the intercepted communications, the confirmation from Thorne's past victims Daniel had tracked down, and Owen's own subtly heightened awareness. It was time. They prepared to present Owen with the irrefutable evidence, ready to expose Serafina's newest, most devastating plot.